254. You see that number on a page, in this case, the Article 18 Annual Report 2026, and it almost looks like just another statistic.
Just a data point.
Exactly. But then you realize that's 254 individual people, Christians, arrested in Iran in just 1 year, 2025. And it's almost double the year before. Suddenly that number, it stops feeling like data. It feels more like a warning siren.
It's the kind of jump that you just can't ignore. When you see a nearly 100% increase in arrests in a human rights report, you know you're not looking at some kind of anomaly.
Right. It's not just a few random incidents.
Not at all. You're looking at a deliberate, calculated shift in state policy. Something changed.
And that's what we need to get into with this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've got the report. It's incredibly detailed about the events of 2025. But our mission here isn't just to, list off the violations.
We need to understand the why.
We need to understand the kitchen where this snuff is being cooked up, to really unpack the mechanism, the specific gears and levers a government pulls to turn, say, a private prayer meeting into a threat to national security. Because 2025, it wasn't just a bad year. It was a year the definition of the enemy was fundamentally altered.
That shift you just mentioned, that's the absolute critical piece of this whole puzzle. The state didn't just arrest more people, they changed why they were arresting them.
They moved the goalposts.
Completely. They shifted the crime from, say, religious deviance to straight-up espionage. And that change in the official narrative is what sent those numbers through the roof.
Which, that brings us right to the context, doesn't it? You can't separate these numbers from the bigger picture of 2025. The report draws this really hard, bright line connecting the crackdown to the conflict that dominated the news that summer.
The 12-day war with Israel.
Which ended in June.
Right. And the timeline is. It's almost surgically precise. The ceasefire is on June 24th. And almost immediately you see the internal security machine of the Iranian state pivot. It turns inward.
It's a classic move, isn't it?
It's a classic authoritarian reflex. When you face external pressure, or maybe you don't get the victory you wanted abroad, you manufacture one at home. You find a scapegoat to tighten the ranks.
The rally around the flag effect, but turned against your own citizens.
The much darker side of it, yes. The regime needed a narrative for the conflict. And more than that, they needed to purge what they saw as a fifth column. So the language around Christians, specifically converts from Islam, it gets a complete rebrand.
They stopped being just apostates or infidels.
Which are religious terms, Instead, they started being labeled Zionist agents.
And that language is so much more dangerous. In the lexicon of the Islamic Republic, being an infidel might get you harassed. Being a Zionist can get you executed. It reframes the religious minority as an active military threat.
The data backs that up completely. Look at the 6 months before the war. You have about, 40 arrests?
Which is already high, but it's their grim version of normal.
Exactly. Then, in the single month after the ceasefire, over 50 arrests. The correlation is just a vertical line on the graph.
And it's not like the Ministry of Intelligence, the MOIS, was subtle about it. They put out that statement, didn't they? Explicitly calling the people they arrested Mossad mercenaries.
Or trained elements disguised as evangelical Christians. That was the exact phrase. And it's, I have to say, a brilliant and horrific piece of propaganda. It completely delegitimizes the faith element.
By saying they're disguised.
Yes. That one word gives the security forces a blank check. They can treat a grandmother or a house painter like a foreign commando. Because they aren't arresting citizens anymore, you see, they're dismantling a network. Due process goes out the window.
And UN experts warned this was coming. They saw the intensified risk for minorities right after the conflict. But this is where it gets confusing for an outsider and where I think people get tripped up.
The propaganda paradox.
Yes. Because at the same time the MOIS is hunting Zionist Christians, state media is broadcasting images of what? A new metro station in Tehran named after the Virgin Mary.
The Virgin Mary Station. It's the perfect encapsulation of their strategy.
It seems like a total contradiction. In August 2025, you've got headlines about forced confessions of Christian converts. 2 months later, in October, you've got headlines welcoming a subway station honoring the mother of Jesus. But it's not a contradiction, is it?
Not at all. It's a very deliberate duality. It's a state survival strategy.
Yeah.
And to get it, you have to understand that the regime has basically created two classes, two castes of Christians.
You have the recognized group.
Right. Ethnic Armenians and Assyrians. These communities have been in Iran for centuries. They have their own languages, their own history, and this is the crucial part. They are insular. They keep to themselves.
They're almost like museum piece Christians.
Mm.
The state gives them seats in parliament, they have their church buildings, they can even make their own wine for communion.
But there's an unwritten contract.
You stay in your ethnic box, and we leave you alone.
The core condition is silence. They cannot preach in Persian, the national language. They cannot open their doors to converts from a Muslim background. As long as they remain this kind of ethnic curiosity, they're useful.
They're props. The state can point to them and say, see, we have churches, we're tolerant. The metro station is for them. It's a billboard for the international community.
But then you have the second class, the unrecognized Christians.
The converts, people born into Muslim families who choose Christianity.
And they are the target. They have no legal status. In the eyes of the law, they are Muslims who have committed a crime. And because they speak Persian and they share their faith, they break that unwritten contract of silence. They're seen as a contagion.
So when we see the report contrasting the metro station with the crackdown, it's not the regime being confused.
No, it's the regime sending a very clear message. We will tolerate the static historical Christianity that stays in its lane. We will destroy the dynamic, growing Christianity that crosses cultural and religious lines.
And they destroy it by criminalizing the most basic act of all, just getting together.
Which brings us to the legal weapons they use. If you're a convert, you can't have a church building, so you meet in a home. The state then defines that as an illegal gathering. But in 2025, they really sharpen the knife with some very specific laws.
We see one law mentioned over and over in the report. Article 500 bis. It was used in nearly 90% of the charges last year. That seems to be the main tool.
Article 500 bis is the catch-all. It criminalizes propaganda contrary to the holy religion of Islam, and it's intentionally vague.
So what does that mean in practice?
It could mean anything. You tell a friend you're praying for them in Jesus' name. That's propaganda. You discuss a Bible verse in a way a cleric wouldn't. Propaganda. It lets the judiciary skip the messy theological debate about apostasy, which is actually hard to prove in court, and just charge people with acting against the state.
But 2025 saw a heavier hammer come into play. We talked about that Zionist label.
And that manifested in Article 8. This is a whole new law on countering the hostile actions of the Zionist regime.
So this is where the spy narrative becomes a legal reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Article 8 lets prosecutors leapfrog over the propaganda charge and go straight for espionage. The report details at least 5 Christians who were charged under this specific law in 2025.
And the sentences? They just skyrocket. For those 5 people alone, we're looking at over 40 years of prison time combined.
The total sentencing for the year was over 280 years. And at least 11 people received sentences of 10 years or more.
10 years?
A decade. Think about that. 10 years is a sentence you'd expect for a violent felony, armed robbery, maybe. Here, it's being handed down for belonging to a house church.
The bureaucratization of it all is what's so chilling. It's not a mob in the street. It's a judge with a gavel and a specific statute. But the enforcement on the street, that seems to be changing too. The report notes a shift in who is making the arrests.
From the Ministry of Intelligence, the MOIS, to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC.
And that's a significant change.
It's a terrifying development for anyone on the ground. The MOIS is a traditional intelligence agency. They are psychological, they want information, they're scary, but they're somewhat predictable. The IRGC is an ideological militia. They're the Praetorian Guard for the supreme leader.
So when the IRGC gets involved, the mission changes from intelligence gathering to
ideological purging. The brutality ramps up immediately. The report details this one raid in Kitab, Mazandaran, in February 2025. It was gathering in a garden.
a garden party.
20 plainclothes agents storm in. Now, the Moyas might have filmed everyone, taken IDs, maybe arrested 1 or 2 leaders. The IRGC agents, they physically attacked the guests. They started forcibly tearing cross necklaces off people's necks, causing injuries.
One witness in the report described them using obscene language, just deliberately humiliating people.
Exactly. It wasn't just about enforcement. It was about degradation. That is the IRGC signature. They don't need a warrant. They feel they have a mandate from God. This shift tells us the regime is losing patience with managing the Christian community and is moving towards violently suppressing it.
And what do they find when they do these raids? What's the evidence they collect? It's not weapons caches.
No. They're finding books.
Bibles.
Bibles.
Huh.
In 2025 Iran, having a Bible in Persian is basically treated like having narcotics. You have to remember, the Bible Society was shut down way back in 1990.
So for 35 years, there's been no legal way to print or buy one.
Which means any Bible they find is, by definition, smuggled. The report says 21 Christians were sentenced specifically for Bible distribution. But the most absurd detail is what they do with the confiscated
The
books.
research purposes excuse.
It's just a dark irony. The court orders often state that the Bibles are to be delivered to the Ministry of Intelligence for research, as if the text itself is some dangerous virus that only state scientists can handle safely. It frames the Bible not as a holy book, but as a hazardous material.
And it goes beyond just books, right? It extends to things like travel.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
If you can't get any Christian education in Iran, where do you go? You might go to a conference in Turkey or Armenia, but in 2025, that travel is being used against you in court.
It's reframed as meeting with foreign handlers.
It fits perfectly into that Article 8 Zionist spy narrative. The prosecutor asks, why did you go to Turkey? You say, to learn about the Trinity. The judge hears, to meet my Mossad contact. The travel itself becomes proof of treason.
There was one indictment mentioned in the report against 5 Christians that just laid out their so-called crimes in plain text. It didn't even use the word espionage. It listed
Praying, performing baptisms, and celebrating Christmas.
it sounds like a parody.
But it's a legal document. Celebrating Christmas was listed as direct evidence of collusion against the regime. When a government says celebrating a birth is a threat to its own survival, you've entered a very, very strange reality.
We've talked so much about the system, the laws, the politics, the different agencies, but the report is, at its heart, about people. And the section on the human toll it's just heavy. It's not just about prison time. It's about the physical destruction of the person.
The medical neglect is so stark. It's a deliberate tool of torture. It's this sort of passive-aggressive violence. You look at the case of Ada Najaflu.
She was the woman in Evan prison.
Yes, she fell from a bunk bed. The
Mhm.
facilities are dangerously overcrowded, and she fractured her spine, a broken back.
Unbelievable.
She was taken to a hospital, but then, completely against medical advice, she was dragged back to prison almost immediately.
The report says she developed a severe infection, was left in agony, and was at risk of permanent paralysis.
It's not just negligence, it's a statement. It's the state saying, you are an enemy, and therefore you do not deserve to heal. We saw the same thing with Nesser Navard Goltafa, an older man who had a stroke while in solitary confinement.
Solitary is already designed to break the mind. For him, it became a way to break his body.
And then there was that mass transfer on June 23rd, right around the end of the war, tying back into that timeline. After some incident at Evan, they moved a huge number of prisoners.
The women were sent to Karchak prison.
Which is Evan is a dungeon, Korchak is a cesspool. People call it the chicken farm because the conditions are so filthy, so cramped. The report details the transfer itself. Prisoners, handcuffed together, tangled up, denied water in the summer heat. They were treated like livestock.
It's all about stripping away dignity before you even get to the cell. But there's one story in the report, it's not about physical pain, but it's the one that haunts me the most. The Iranian Armenian man who was rearrested.
Yes. While he was in custody, his mother passed away, just 2 months after his arrest. Now, in almost any functioning legal system, even for the worst crimes, there's usually a process for compassionate leave. A few hours for a funeral.
He was denied.
He was locked in a cell while his family buried his mother. That is a specific kind of psychological torture. The message is, we own you. We own your body, your time, and we even own your grief. You are cut off from the human cycle of life and death.
That's the goal, isn't it? Isolation. They isolate the recognized Christians into their ethnic boxes. They isolate the unrecognized ones in prison cells, isolate the sick from medicine. And the report ends with this final visual metaphor. The old missionary hospital in Kerman.
A national monument, a beautiful piece of the country's history. And now it's a ruin. It's occupied by rough sleepers. The state just refuses to maintain it. They're letting the physical history of Christianity in their country rot, just as they try to let the prisoners rot.
So you step back and look at the whole picture of 2025. You have 254 arrests, the 12-day war, this new Zionist narrative, the rise of the IRGC and enforcement, the criminalization of Christmas.
It's a whole mosaic of repression. But what really strikes me is just how disproportionate it all is.
That's the thought I can't shake. You're talking about a major regional power. Iran has a huge military advanced drone technology, a vast intelligence network. They project power all across the Middle East.
And yet
the same regime is pouring massive resources, manpower, court time, international political capital into raiding garden parties and confiscating paperback books.
it's the ultimate paradox of authoritarianism, isn't it?
It really forces you to ask the question. If a prayer meeting in someone's living room is treated as a national security threat on the same level as foreign espionage, How strong is that government, really?
A government that is confident in its own ideology doesn't need to fear a baptism. A system that feels secure doesn't need to frame a grandmother as a Mossad agent. The sheer ferocity of this crackdown in 2025, it doesn't reveal the strength of the regime. It reveals its fragility. They are terrified of an alternative idea simply taking root.
They're trying to fight ideas with handcuffs, and, history shows that's usually a losing battle, even if the human cost is terribly high along the way. This report is a heavy read, but a necessary one to understand what's really going on behind the headlines. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's always a privilege.
We'll see you in the next one.